In today's episode of the Villains Corner, we will be going over the story of Anub'arak, the last king of the Nerubian Empire. The story of Anub'arak starts off with the War of the Spider. Anub'arak was the king of the Nerubians in Northrend, a race of insectoid monsters created by the Old Gods. When the Lich King Ner'zhul set up shop in Northrend, he went about conquering all living things there and turning them into his army. But when he ran into the Nerubians, they were much harder to subjugate than everything else he came across. And much to his chagrin, he found out that the Nerubians were immune to his plague of undeath. So in order to raise the Nerubians into his army, he had to basically do it manually, the old-fashioned way, which started a multi-years-long war of attrition because they couldn't actually beat the Nerubians in open combat, as the Nerubians were experts of guerrilla warfare. So the Lich King's idea of beating the Nerubians was just to slowly whittle down their numbers and raise their fallen allies as undead. And then eventually, he was able to kill Anub'arak and raise him as his best servant. Then, with how hard it was to take down Anub'arak and raise the Nerubians, the Lich King thought to himself that he really liked his new puppet of Anub'arak. He was a very powerful undead monster he had under his control, who was able to lead his army of Nerubians for him on his own. So he decided he wanted more strong minds working under him just like Anub'arak. And that's when he sent out his psychic signal to around the world looking for allies, which attracted Kel'Thuzad. When Kel'Thuzad made his way to Northrend, Anub'arak was the person who greeted him. Anub'arak then went around the necropolis, showing Kel'Thuzad all that he was to know about the Lich King, his plague of undeath, and what they were all about. And Kel'Thuzad was so impressed by Anub'arak, as he was this giant insectoid monster that was completely subservient to the Lich King, while he was only able to raise rats back home, and not even very well. Kel'Thuzad, in awe of Anub'arak, said that in exchange for immortality, Anub'arak had chosen to serve the Lich King, which was remarkable. To which Anub'arak replied, "Agreed implies choice," basically telling Kel'Thuzad that he did not choose to serve the Lich King of his own free will. Then Kel'Thuzad goes off and does his own thing, which is covered in another Villains Corner video. But then Anub'arak's story doesn't pick up again until Arthas is trying to return to Northrend. With the Lich King weakening, Arthas was also pretty weak as well, as he was almost just killed by Sylvanas. So he really needed to get back to the Frozen Throne and fuse with the Lich King in order to fix his power crisis. But Illidan with his forces of Naga and Blood Elves were in Northrend as well, and some of the Blood Elves found Arthas and attacked him, to which Anub'arak had to come in and save him. Since Illidan's forces were everywhere, they couldn't just go straight to the Frozen Throne, and instead devised a plan to get there without having to fight through Illidan's army. So in order to establish an army of their own, they went and formulated a plan to kill the blue dragon Sapphiron, so they could raise him as a powerful ally and steal his treasures to bolster their forces. After succeeding in killing the blue dragon, Anub'arak told Arthas that he could take him through the underground ruins of Azjol-Nerub to reach Icecrown. And while navigating the underground labyrinth city, most of the inhabitants kept saying, "Traitor King," to which Arthas remarked, "I didn't know they knew who I was." And Anub'arak replied with "I believe they're referring to me." Because you see, not all the Nerubians died during the War of the Spider, but the Lich King did send Anub'arak in there to kill them from time to time, so the remaining Nerubians thought of Anub'arak as the Traitor King for serving the Lich King. Anyways, as they fought their way through the underground city, they ran into some dwarves, and the dwarves were also pissed at Arthas because they thought he'd killed Mirrodin, and they were trying to block off some hidden old god thing. So Arthas and Anub'arak killed the dwarves and went into the room, and then killed the old god thing that tried attacking them. Now I should mention here, the reason this old god thing attacked the Nerubians, even though the Nerubians are old god minions, is because all the Nerubians involved in this are undead, and the old gods hate the undead. I only mention this here because this little scene is brought up sometimes when people like to talk about Warcraft plot holes. Anyways, after escaping the underground city, Arthas ran into Illidan and had to fight him while Anub'arak protected him from everyone else, basically allowing Arthas and Illidan to have a one-on-one. After Arthas beat Illidan, Anub'arak helped him activate the 4 crystals or whatever, and Arthas climbed the Frozen Throne and fused with Ner'zhul and became the Lich King. Now, Blizzard said they had a lot of plans for Anub'arak for Wrath of the Lich King, but then they ended up scrapping the gigantic zone of Azjol-Nerub, and I assume with this, they also scrapped whatever story they had planned for Anub'arak, because Anub'arak in Wrath of the Lich King was basically just a boss in a dungeon that you had to kill. And then he was a raid boss for Trial of the Crusader, who you had to kill after the Lich King broke the ground from underneath the stadium. And after killing Anub'arak, he does thank you for finally freeing him from his service from the Lich King, because Anub'arak never liked serving him, and Arthas was constantly afraid he might break free and attack him during their journeys together to the Frozen Throne. Alright, and that's it for the story of Anub'arak. In his trailer for Heroes of the Storm, Anub'arak mentions again how he was forced to serve the Lich King and didn't like it very much. And in his Hearthstone card, he has a flavor text that says, Anub'arak was actually kind of a nice guy, before the whole Lich King thing. Now, seeing as he was a servant of an old god, I doubt he would have been that much of a good guy if he was never taken control over by the Lich King. And again, thanks to Rachel for the wonderful drawings for this video. If you want to help support this series, why not try heading over to Patreon, since the video series requires way too much work to create for how little ad revenue it makes. And I'd really like to keep making these.